Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a beautiful and gentle princess named Emily. She lived in a grand palace with her mother, the queen, who adored her dearly. Emily was known throughout the kingdom for her beauty and kindness, and many princes from neighboring lands came to court her. Yet despite all the admiration she received, Emily was not interested in marriage. She loved her freedom and spent her days enjoying the gardens, reading books, and spending time with her mother. The queen, however, grew concerned. She knew that Emily needed to marry eventually and wanted her daughter to find a kind and noble husband who would care for her. The queen often spoke to Emily about the importance of finding a partner, but Emily remained indifferent. One evening, as the sun began to set, the queen went for a walk in the royal garden. The orange trees were in full bloom, and their sweet scent filled the air. As the queen approached her favorite tree, she sighed, thinking about Emily's future. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound, and from behind the orange tree stepped a tiny figure. It was a dwarf, no taller than the queen's knee, with a bright yellow coat and a mischievous grin. His eyes twinkled with cunning, and his crooked smile revealed his sharp, small teeth. The queen gasped in surprise. "Who are you?" the queen asked, startled by the dwarf's sudden appearance. "I am the Yellow Dwarf," he replied in a raspy voice. "I've been watching you, my queen, and I know you worry about your daughter's future. I can help." The queen, desperate to ensure Emily's happiness, listened intently as the dwarf spoke. He told her that he possessed magical powers and could make sure that Emily would marry a prince who would love and protect her forever. The queen, feeling both hopeful and nervous, asked the dwarf what he wanted in return. With a sly grin, the dwarf said, "All I ask is that you promise me your daughter's hand in marriage to whomever I choose. I assure you she will be happy." The queen, without thinking too deeply about the consequences, agreed. She was so eager to see Emily's future secured that she did not question the dwarf's intentions. With a wave of his hand, the Yellow Dwarf disappeared into the trees, leaving the queen alone in the garden. The next morning, the queen returned to the palace feeling uneasy about the deal she had made. She decided not to tell Emily, hoping that the dwarf would keep his promise and that everything would turn out well. Days passed, and soon enough, a handsome prince from a nearby kingdom arrived at the palace. His name was Prince Edward, and he had heard tales of Emily's beauty and grace. He came to the palace in hopes of winning her heart. Prince Edward was kind, brave, and noble, everything the queen had wished for in a suitor for her daughter. He and Emily quickly became friends, and soon their friendship blossomed into love. Emily's heart had never felt so full, and for the first time she considered the idea of marriage. The queen was overjoyed and began to prepare for their engagement, believing that the dwarf had kept his promise. However, on the night before the engagement was to be announced, the Yellow Dwarf reappeared. This time, he did not come alone. He brought with him a dark cloud of magic that filled the palace halls. The queen, terrified, confronted the dwarf. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "You promised my daughter would marry a prince who would love her." The dwarf chuckled darkly. "I promised she would marry someone of my choosing," he sneered. "And I have chosen myself." The queen's heart sank. She had unknowingly promised her beloved daughter to this wicked dwarf, and now there was no way to break the pact. The Yellow Dwarf's magic was too strong, and the queen realized her grave mistake. When Emily heard the news, she was devastated. The thought of marrying the cruel and cunning dwarf filled her with dread. She wept for days, her heart breaking at the thought of losing Prince Edward. Despite the Queen's pleas for forgiveness, Emily could not be comforted. Her only hope now rested in Prince Edward's hands. When Prince Edward learned of the terrible fate that awaited Emily, he was determined to save her. He vowed to rescue her from the dwarf, no matter the cost. Armed with his sword and his unwavering love for Emily, Edward set off to find the Yellow Dwarf and put an end to his dark magic. The journey was long and treacherous. Edward traveled through dark forests and crossed dangerous rivers, facing all manner of challenges along the way. But his love for Emily gave him the strength to carry on. After many days, he finally reached the dwarf's lair, a twisted palace deep within the mountains, surrounded by dark clouds and jagged rocks. Edward stormed into the palace, calling out the dwarf's name. The Yellow Dwarf appeared, grinning wickedly. "Ah, the brave prince has come to rescue his beloved," the dwarf sneered. "But you are too late. Emily is mine." Edward, undeterred by the dwarf's taunts, drew his sword and challenged the dwarf to a duel. The dwarf, though small, was powerful, and he called upon his dark magic to fight the prince. The battle was fierce, with flashes of lightning and gusts of wind filling the air. But Edward was fueled by love, and with one final strike, he defeated the Yellow Dwarf, breaking the curse that bound Emily to him. As the dwarf's magic faded away, the dark clouds lifted, and the sun shone once again. Edward rushed back to the palace, where Emily awaited him. She ran into his arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. The nightmare was over, and she was free. Emily and Edward were married in a grand celebration, and the kingdom rejoiced. The Queen, though still haunted by the deal she had made with the dwarf, was grateful that her daughter had found true happiness. From that day on, Emily and Edward ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, their love a shining example for all who knew them. And so, the story of the Yellow Dwarf became a tale of love, bravery, and redemption, reminding all that true love can conquer even the darkest of magic.